Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. Welcome back, coaches. This is the Coaching 101 podcast. And I have to, try not to say the wrong podcast name. That's my tagline to open, and I told Kenny a moment ago, I'm just going to stick with it. We're going to run it. It's going to be a lot of fun hosting two podcasts, and this one's going to sound similar, I guess, but we'll make it work. I am Daniel Chamberlain, co-host. I'm here with Coach Simpson. How are you this evening, sir?
Doing well. I've had, we got in Arkansas, apparently every bit of pollen has fallen from the sky. So I'll have to kind of be shorter in some of my answers and drink a lot of water to not drive everybody nuts with my voice. But other than that, I'm doing really well. You?
Yeah. I washed my truck. I take mine to the Blue Beacon. It's like $30, but it usually lasts for a month of just beautiful truck. The next morning I had yellow pollen. So Yep. It is officially hit. Man, it's been good. It's been a good week. Since the last time we recorded, I got to spend this weekend at a couple of football practices with University of Tulsa. So just had an absolute blast there. It's going to fit right into what we're talking about tonight. So tonight we're talking some practice organization and what drills you use and how you're going to organize your coaching and the team. And so it's going to be a really good episode talking about practice. And it fit right in because that's what I got to do this week was just watch guys who are way better at this than me break down some stuff and watch their practice a couple times. So their spring game was a little different. They did a spring open practice, basically. Just had all their alumni and stuff on campus. So ton of fun. Really learned a lot from those guys. Got to go through their initial install on defense. So that was great. I think it was the Jim Knowles defense from when he was at Oklahoma State, and he took it, of course, to Ohio State. So they let me, get my pinky toe wet with it. Nothing else, but I got that initial install, and that was a really good time. So
yeah, I think a lot of high school coaches are kind of nervous about going to colleges, but every time I've ever gone, they've always been very open. And I mean, it's just when you get there, you kind of go, oh, it's just football, just with better athletes, and then I would imagine, I've never been to an NFL practice, but I would imagine the same thing. It's still football. You're just dealing with better athletes, but there's still people.
Right.
I'm sure you probably got to see, oh, these guys aren't just people that are on my TV screen, like they're actual human beings,
No, that's a really big point for both the athletes and the coaches, right? I mean, you can get starstruck if you get in the room with, whoever. If I was in the room with Tom Brady, I'm probably going to be like, I'm not saying anything. I'll sound like an idiot. But at the same time, he's just a dude, right? At the end of the day. And that's how some of the coaches are. I've built a pretty good relationship with Dominic Franks, and he was a OU star and then went on to play in the NFL for like 7 years or something. And now he started coaching at Owasso here close to me, and he's went to USFL, and then now he's back. He's at Tulsa as their safeties coach. And so he's kind of how I got my foot in the door. So that helped me comfort. Otherwise, I would have been kind of blown away. The communication's weird. Like, you don't know where to go. Do I walk in the field house, or is that sacred ground? Like, there's a lot of what ifs, so it's kind of, you don't want to seem like the guy that doesn't know what he's doing, but you're new there and you don't know what you're doing. So
yeah, well, I travel a lot. Coach Gould and I do. I know he's going to be on our next week's episode, or maybe whenever it's going to end up being. I know we're kind of recording these and putting them out there, but we got to go to Boise State. They walked us around their campus and getting to meet with their strength guys, and we're shaking hands. And one of them had heard of some of my stuff, and so Bo was like, "How does this guy know you?" And I said, "I don't know. This is kind of crazy because we're over here in the blue turf. I'm starstruck because you see it on TV. It's kind of a unique place, a really cool kind of atmosphere. They've done such a good job with it, and they're just normal people. And I think a lot of high school guys that might be listening to this, don't hesitate to reach out to your local college. I mean, those guys, they're going to want a good relationship with you because eventually you might have a player that can help them out.
Right.
And so it's always going to be kind of an open door. And every time you keep saying we're doing practice organization, we should have queued up the Allen Iverson practice section, because that's all I'm hearing right now every time we say practice organization. So
that's awesome. Well, before we get started here, Coach, why don't you tell us some ways that the coaches who are trying to get into business can keep things simple for their staff or their athletes?
Sure. Our podcast is sponsored by Find Away Productions. So Find Away Productions hosts multiple different places you can go to find some football. The Offensive Coordinator Academy.com, which obviously is geared for the offensive coach. There's a full academy you can go through. There's books and materials that are over there that'll help you get organized on that side of the ball. There's single products like a call sheet, templates, just different things for the offensive-minded coach. Then Defensive Coordinator Academy.com is the opposite. It's the same idea for the defensive coaches, a full academy. There's some books, there's some single courses there. We're actually in the process right now of building out an offensive line, a coach academy, and a defensive line coach academy. So that's going to be coming out really, really soon. Excited about both of those. And then most people probably know Find Away Productions because we produce FBCoachSimpson.com, which is where you can go over and find all kinds of coaching resources, free resources like Headsets, the magazine, which we have 3 more of those coming out on this run, but there have been 2 seasons already. So about 21 different magazines. You can go through there. They're all digital. And the best part, they're all free. Of course, there's multiple coaching books over there. And then if you're interested in the gun tee system or the 3-4 swarm system, those are also available over at FBCoachSimpson.com.
Yeah, and I don't think you talk enough about your gun tee system, because that's something that that's how I originally got to know you, was coming to that national clinic there in Batesville. And weirdly enough, my year immediately following that, I fell into a staff who was running it. And you talk about, people at Boise State had heard of it. So obviously a very big deal. And man, it's wonderful. It's a program that I've bought into and I use. We try to buy all the books as they come out, and man, it's a wonderful product. So if you're out there and you're looking for an offense, the gun tee system is one that works. I agree with everything you say when I'm at that clinic, and that is, it helps basically the guy that doesn't know what he's got put some points on the board, right? You just make the other kid wrong. If I'm making a 14 to 18-year-old wrong, it's not as hard as you think. And it makes you look good as a coach. So
I appreciate it, man. It's been really, really cool. That system is now running all 50 states. It's run at the collegiate level all the way down to, I'm sure, several youth. I've got a lot of youth materials for those guys. And it's actually now being run in 6 continents, which is pretty insane that somebody from, I didn't know that you had American football in Japan. Apparently you do. And somebody's running the gun tee up there. And so he keeps me updated on how they're doing. So it's been a pretty cool journey.
Coach, you're going to have to fly over there at some point and see it. So you get to visit.
That was my goal. I'm trying to figure out how to make sure that this works where I can do a world tour. Unfortunately, they're like, well, here's $50. So that plane ticket's a little more than that.
Right. Yep. That'll be your first world tour will be amazing. Well, man, we will jump into the questions for tonight. So like I said earlier, we're talking practice organization, and we'll start at the very basics here and just talk about kind of what goes into your practice organization.
Well, when you're thinking about practice, there's multiple ways to do it. There's never one. So we're going to give some ideas tonight of things that I've done. Daniel, I'm sure, is going to share some things that he's done. But he just went to Tulsa, and they might do it totally different. So your situation is going to dictate a lot of what you can do. Are you a staff of 8 coaches just coaching offense? Are you at a collegiate level? Are you at a high school level? Do you have 75 kids? When I was at Searcy, we had about 60 some odd kids, one-way players. Now I'm at Southside. A lot of our kids go both ways, not as many coaches. So there's a lot of variables. So we can't answer all those things for you, but those are things you need to think about, because a lot of times as coaches, we just copy what we know. So you go to a college and you watch Tulsa practice. Well, let's go do that. Well, that may not look as good for your 35 kids you have running the same kind of practice they did. It's not what they did was wrong. It just doesn't necessarily work for you. So that's my big caveat up front. And I'm going to give a kind of our coaches don't screw up takeaway at the end of the show, which will kind of hit a similar vein with that. But when you're building a practice, there's basically 3 different things you're looking at. So up front, and I'm going to hit a couple of these, Daniel, and let you kind of chime in, and we can go through all 3 of these. I know my voice is going to make all 3 in a row. So
you're good.
So the first one will be individual time. This is probably the most premier time of practice for you to get your guys better. This is where you work on the fundamentals of whatever offensive structure or defensive structure you're running. And again, I would be careful here not just to run drills and you say these are fundamental drills, so you go buy a book or you go find a drill on YouTube or go find a drill at a college, and that, and you start running that. This needs to match what you're trying to accomplish. So there are some what we call universal drills. Like most tackling drills, there are flavors of tackling, but most tackling drills are relatively universal. They would translate whatever scheme you run, whatever level you're at. Obviously, you can make them a little harder as they progress up. But then there are other individual drills that are going to be very unique to what you're running. For instance, we run the gun tee. You've kind of mentioned it. So our offensive line time is going to look vastly different than a team that might be running 10 personnel zone, inside zone, or at a collegiate level where all their linemen weigh 300 pounds. We have guards that pull on almost every play. Same thing if you're running like a flex bone offense. So there's several flavors of that, and just be really careful during that individual time that your drills are done to make your guys good at what you need to win. So if you throw the ball 3 times a game, probably not the best idea to schedule in a whole bunch of ball drills and routes. Let's work our receivers on stock blocking, or maybe the 3 or 4 other things we're asking them to do. Or it could be the opposite. If we're going to throw the ball 90% of the time, we better work on pass pro with our linemen. Defensively, the same idea. If we're going to be a blitz happy team, we need to work on individual time. What does that look like? How do we time up blitzes? What's our aiming point on blitzes? If we're really not going to blitz, why are we wasting our time on that? So what I would suggest you do is you work backwards. You start with a goal in mind of the skill set needed for your player, and then you work backward and build out the drills from there, and just allot the proper time for the skill you need. So we actually will put through every position we have on our football team, and we'll kind of rank the 3 major skills they need. So an example, we'll just use kind of as our wing back in our offense, or an H-back, fullback type kid. We say number 1 skill he's going to have is going to be able to block. And then what kind of blocks does he need to perform? Then number 2 skill, we're going to throw the ball at him out of the backfield. So he's going to be able to catch the ball. What routes is he going to run? And we may every now and then hand that kid the ball. So that falls to number 3. So when we're prioritizing our individual drills, we're looking at how much time does this kid need to work on these different skills in proportion to how many times is he going to do that in a game. So again, start with the end in mind and work backwards. Before we jump to other ones, Daniel, we'll let you jump in what you think of like individual time, things that you can help some guys out with.
Mine kind of fits into part 2 probably a little better. We're going to talk about what makes a good drill, but just don't get bored as a coach. So, it's real easy to the same coach that wants to pull every cool play they saw on Saturday and put it in their offense and name it after their name nomenclature and run it, might be the guy who gets bored with a simple run fit drill, right? But the truth is, if you turn on the tape on Friday, if you aren't 10-0, there's a reason. And I would say pushing 50 to 70% of high school teams are still trying to run the ball down your throat every play. So getting bored with the run fit drill, but you're still losing a game or 2 or 8 because you can't stop the run, that's counterintuitive. So you just need to you're talking about the skills you need to get, those top 3 skills. Don't get away from those drills just because you start to get good at that skill or you start to get bored of that drill. Keep honing it. That's where you as a coach have to step up and coach that next detail. So, if I'm working linebacker reads very early in the season, I may just be worried about like, can they, we teach if it's a down block or whatever, we're fitting the hole. If he pulls, I'm going with him and fitting underneath in the next open window. And then of course a pass set, I'm getting to my drop and wherever my zone is as a linebacker. And then by week 5 or 6, we start getting good at that. That's when I've really focused on no false steps, making sure I'm taking my appropriate read steps, or, some defenses use like almost a lateral movement for the linebackers, or, so then I can hone in those details, but don't get bored in the beginning and don't get, even at the end of the season, keep hammering that stuff. If you're winning games, there's a reason why. You don't want to get away from a winning recipe. And if you're losing games, make sure you haven't gotten bored and moved into too many drills.
Sure. And the last thing I'd kind of give you a caveat on is now spring football, summer football, August football is probably the most individual time you're going to get. Because as the season hits, You have JV ball games, you have junior high ball games, you have a game on Friday. You can't get kids real hurt, so you don't want to have a 5-hour practice. So you're going to lose individual time as the season goes on, and it will carry over into the next two kind of segments we're going to get to. So the next segment we call it pod time. So we're a little unique from a lot of teams, although I'm starting to see this is catching on at a lot of different levels. Pod for me, essentially, and it can be flavored however you want to flavor it, but this is where you have multiple positions coming together to work a concept. So if you're on the defensive side of the ball, this might where you bring the safeties and the outside linebackers together to work a run fit, like Daniel mentioned, where they're working like an alley drill. So we're going to bring the outside linebackers, the corners, and the safeties together, and they're going to work that run fit, maybe bubble screen, whatever it might be. It could be your defensive line and your outside linebackers are coming together because you're going to play a tight end team, and your outside backers got to learn how to play a 9 technique that week. So he's going to go with the guy that he was a line coach to get better. Offensively, we do the same things with ours. So like for us, we pull guards a lot. So a lot of times our guards will end up going with our quarterbacks and our running backs simply because they're going to kind of need to work in unison. You can see it with screen drills where maybe you're the quick side of your line or like the left side of your line, whatever you're running offensively. They're working with the receivers on a screen drill. So what we're trying to accomplish on this is two things. One, we're teaching the concept. So where we're usually working a specific mindset. So defense, I pointed out run fit, screen drill, whatever. Offense, it might be a specific play. Like we're working a specific play where these guys have to work in tandem together. And the second reason we do it is because a lot of times you might be at a position where you don't have enough coaches. So we kind of got to this because of that reason. But now that we have enough coaches, we've kind of kept it. We like to put a coach in charge of a skill set. So for instance, if we're going to do any kind of ball drill, which would be with our receivers, we will throw the ball to our running backs. We'll throw the ball to our tight ends. We'll throw the ball to our wing backs or H backs. If they're going to do any kind of drill where they're catching a football, I want them with the guy who's an expert at that, who's the receiver coach. If they're going to work on ball security, they're going to go with the running back coach. And that could be the receivers working ball security. That could be the quarterbacks working ball security. That could be a lot of guys. If they're working spatial blocking, they're usually going to work with our tight end coach. That's what he's much more comfortable with that world. So there's times we might have a player, specifically like an H-back or a running back. He may rotate through 3 different coaches in a given practice. And that's awkward and different the first few times you do it because you're kind of like, well, who's his coach? Well, we're all his coach. The reality is we are all his coach. And it kind of forces us to speak the same language and verbiage as a staff. It also puts the guy who's comfortable teaching the skill with the player so he can teach the skill correctly. And so that's something we've done that's a little bit unique. Not every team does that. I would challenge you as a staff to think about ways you could do that. I think it's very beneficial. Then the next part of practice after our pod time, and for us, we count that as kind of individual. So individual and pod are kind of together because we are working on fundamental skills. So again, we're trying to develop skills in those groupings. Then we go to what we call group time, which is more your inside drill 7-on-7. I think that's a really common example, but it's good because the more you can have coaches with less players, the more coaching can happen. And so 7-on-7 or inside drill, usually we're going to run about 10 minutes there. And of course, with the flavor of offense or defense you run or who you're playing that week, you may do more time on inside drill than you do on 7-on-7. That's completely up to the coach, but it is usually good, to kind of have that section in there where you can really harp on those players. And finally, we go to team. Team, I think we've got a couple of things we're going to talk about on team, but a couple of things that we have done that I would kind of encourage you to do if you're listening to this is when we do team, we never snap a football in the middle of the field with no situation declared. So what that means is when I was a younger coach, and really when I say younger, I mean like literally like 3 years ago. So it's not like we've come to this pretty recently and I'll never go back. But putting the ball at 50 and just snapping it the same place over and over and running plays. Okay, we're installing plays. We're just trying to get reps. That's kind of what I would say. Well, now whenever we go team, I always want something of a game situation to be on the mind of our players. That could be as simple as moving the ball from the left hash to the middle to the right hash, which is a very common way that we usually will start off our team time. We'll go left hash plays, middle of the field plays, right hash plays. If you want to get super technical, sometimes we'll even go like left center, right center. What it does is your players really, it challenges them to understand that, hey, the field at the high school level, that's 2/3 of the field if you're away from the hash. So
Right.
defensively, that can challenge you a ton on alignment. I've seen looked up in my corner and safety are holding hands. One time, like, what are you guys doing? Because of alignment, that's what it looked like. We said, well, does that make any sense? And so working that had allowed us to fix that. It also challenges you as a coach to go, well, that was stupid. We just rolled our kid into the narrow side of the field and tried to throw an out route and bracket coverage, and so it challenges you both ways. Then we work field position. Like we work, all right, we're moving the ball. I don't really ever bother snapping the ball like from basically our 20 to their 40. Like I don't really, you're going to run your base plays in those sets. You might have a couple places you mark to run a shot play, and that's fine. You got those in there. But then we work mainly red zone, and we work red zone every single day. So we work a flavor of red zone, whether that's what we call high red zone, like that 30 and in, right when the defense is kind of going man. We work normal red zone, and then we work what we call goal line. So now we're like inside the 10-yard line. So we work all of those every day of the week. And then we only work down in distances. We only work third downs and fourth downs. And that's something that's different because a lot of times we need to dominate first down. Well, that should be your base offense. Your base offense.
You worked that in spring ball, and you worked it in your install, and you should have been working that, right?
Correct. Like, I don't think you need to script 1st and 10. Like, okay, you probably figured that one out, but we're going to work third downs every single day with our kids. And I came to that realization because about 4 years ago, we had a senior maybe 5 years ago now, we had a senior quarterback, a leader of our team, one of the smartest kids on our team, one of the best players I've coached. So I don't want to make this kid sound like he was not really intelligent, like he was. He was super intelligent, 2-year starter for us. On 4th and 3, ran out of bounds 2 yards. At 2 yards, ran out of bounds in front of the sticks. The sticks had gotten knocked down. In fairness to him, when you run to the sideline, they drop the sticks. Right. So it's not like he saw it and ran out short. He just lost awareness of what the down and distance was before we did it. And so that's not his fault. Like, that's my fault. We didn't rep that enough for him to feel comfortable. And so we have now made a huge point of emphasis to work that from the spring forward. So imagine if you only work 3rd and 4th downs and you only work red zone, how good your kids are going to be on that. I don't know about you, Danny, when you watch TV, but they don't like look up there and go, hey, how's your 2nd down percentage on offense? Nobody cares about that. You win the game because you converted 3rd downs or you scored in the red zone. And so we're going to be really, really good at those. And we hope that our base offense handles the rest of it. So sorry, that's my caveat on team.
No, it's absolutely great. But before we move on, talking about the kid who ran out of bounds, I remember that Tom Brady last season threw it away on 4th down and was very confused. So the best of the best that's ever done it can lose track of what down it is or how far he had to get or whatever. So definitely not too much of a downside for that kid. And I don't know where he's at now, but he may be.
He'll probably be my boss one day. Maybe he's real smart
right?
kid,
Right. Very good. So man, taking team, I prefaced this with I went to Tulsa this weekend and I got to watch a couple practices, and something I found there. Before I say too much about that, I come out of I've been with 3 teams now, and none of them have practiced like you're talking about situational football. It is very if we move the ball at all to advance, it's because someone just was like, hey man, maybe we should move it today, or it's been getting reps at plays. And I'm sure that's probably what 80% or more of coaches are doing. I just want to watch my kids repping these plays, whatever wrinkle I put in this week, whatever. The idea of running half line, I had heard it, I don't know, wasn't my first year in ball, maybe not my second, so maybe this last one, I don't know. And I thought, that seems like a waste of time. I did not understand all the aspects of half line, and really where I understood it to have a benefit is, hey, I've got 20 kids. I can't field an entire scout So we're going to go half at a time. Or what I do have in scout is terrible, and so I want my good on good, and so we're going to use that left tackle as a defensive end or a defensive tackle, whatever, and I'm going to get good on half the field. And then I go to Tulsa and watch them run half line. Not only that, but they're running it off of a hash. So they start on the left hash and they're running half into the boundary and they're running half into the field. And they have the same plays scripted, but they just see half at a time. And it helps, like, I talked about Coach Franks being a friend of mine. He's the safeties coach. Well, he can't watch both safeties at the same time, right? So they're two platoon. He has two starters on the field, but now he can watch one guy do his job into the boundary and turn around and watch the other guy do his job. And you don't have those receivers on the backside that are just running goes and posts for no reason, right? So it was really odd and then like enlightening to me to see a D1 program is running half line. And this comes from OSU because Kevin Wilson's the new head coach here at Tulsa. So he was the OC at Ohio State last year. And he comes from, I believe it was Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken that, but point is he's at some very high class programs, some teams that are getting it done, getting in the playoffs and everything else, and they're running stinking half line when they have a 4 or 5 deep roster. So, and then they swap out. And so I just thought that was amazing to me how much I had kind of shunned the half line idea. And then I kind of get to go back and go, oh, well, there's a lot of stuff to take from that. And he even talked about, Coach Wilson talked about, he never runs power in team. He's not running power or counter because that's too many of his players' legs together and someone's going to get hurt. A down block pushed, a linebacker's trying to clear a pile, and it's just causing a place where O linemen can get rolled up from behind. And so they only run their gap scheme stuff in half line because that's half as many legs to get hurt. And it was crazy to me. And so it's something I hope to take forward with me is like half line's not bad. You can watch your kids play. You get a lot of reps fast, and the kids are running the ones they need to run. So it's kind of that situational thing you're talking about.
Yeah, I think we're going to hit later on this, talk about like feed the cats kind of theory. I think it kind of sounds like that. Like one thing we've tried to work on with our team and individual, any drills is remove worthless running because you need kids to buy into what you're doing. And when you want them to go full speed, they need to understand the importance of it. So I'm curious if that maybe plays a little role into what you're talking about too.
Yep. So we'll move into the next section here, and that's going to be what makes a good drill. And I'll let you talk about this first. After I found some more fun stuff this weekend talking to the likes of Dub Maddox and some other guys. So it's cool to get to network over there. So first, you talked about building a drill book, and that's a concept that I think a lot of coaches know, but they don't always put that time and effort in, right, to get it right. They just, coach, run whatever you want to run, or they don't want to micromanage. So how do you kind of wade those waters?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So, building a drill book is important for a lot of coaches. So if you're listening to this and you're a head coach and you have a good assistant coach, the odds of him staying with you as a good assistant coach for more than 3-4 years is probably not very high. If he's really good, he's probably going to have the opportunity to move on, or maybe you do really well and you have the opportunity to move on. Something's probably going to happen. And when that happens, you're going to inherit new coaches. And so that's where this usually comes into effect is a head coach brings somebody in who's new or leaves and goes somewhere new and wants to install what he's done. Well, now you can't lean on, well, for the last 8 years, 5 years, 3 years, we've been doing whatever because this guy knows nothing. And a lot of times and I don't mean that ugly, they just don't know your system. So a lot of times schools, especially if you work in like public education, they're not in a rush to like get you a coach. Like if you're in a good place like that, stay at that job and never leave. But most jobs I've been at have been like, oh, it's August 1st. We should probably hire our junior high assistant coach. And so you get this kid, out of college or wherever, maybe the first time he's ever coached football. What are you going to do with that guy? You don't really have time in August to kind of sit down and clinic him for 3 days when y'all are moving from this to that to whatever.
Right.
Or you get a brand new player. This kid comes over to you. He's a senior transfer and he's a stud. And now you're having to try to catch this kid up. That's where the drill book comes into effect. And so a lot of us know the drills we want to run. Or if we haven't, we can go find the drills we want to run. But have we organized those where our coaches have them? So a couple of keys that I'd recommend you do is, one, you film your drills. You can just take your cell phone out. It's not a big deal. Take out your phone and film it, and then write down what you see. Like put that on some kind of template. We offer templates over at my website. There's plenty of places you can go. I'm not trying to be a salesman. You can go buy them wherever you want to, but there are plenty of templates available that you can input your information on the drill you want to run and why it's important. And what that forces you to do as a coach is it forces you to, one, why is it important? Two, what are the coaching points? Like, what are you trying to prove in this? What are you trying to show in this? What are you trying to teach in this? It talks about, I would always include like coaching cues. It's like things you want your coach to say. The final thing on building a drill book that I think is valuable is, a lot of you may have the ability to work with your junior program or maybe even your youth program. And most of us kind of dread that. If we're being honest, if you're a head football coach, you just want to go home. It's not that you don't like the youth football or anything like that. It's that it's 6:30 and the last thing you want to do is go out there and work with fourth and fifth and whatever grade groups. So a lot of times what happens is coaches will just delegate that to parents that want to do well. Like they're out there volunteering their time, like they want to be good, but they have no idea what they're doing because they actually like have real jobs like during the day. They don't sit around and think about football drills like I do, and so this gives you a tool to give them. I promise you, if you go out there and you help them with a tool, with a drill book, you're going to get a lot more buy-in from them. So just think about the different ways you want to do that. I would highly encourage you to do it. We're in April right now. Probably by the time this comes out, be in May. So we're in May right now. Think about during this summer putting this together when you have downtime, because you have it now. And then we also give it to our players a lot of time. Like we'll talk about the drill we're doing. Here's why we're doing this drill. Here's how this drill works. Here's the point of this drill. And now you don't have kids dreading coming to practice because they understand this drill helps me do X, Y, and Z skill that are going to help us win in the game. And so it forces you to do. And all the other thing I found out, kind of a side benefit here, is we don't want to put a bunch of random drills we're not going to run on a drill book because that takes a lot of time. So it kind of makes you as a coach, you kind of go, oh, we're not really going to run that drill, so that's not going to be in there. And it makes you prioritize the drills you want to run. So we got some other things we're going to talk about on here, but Daniel, anything you want to kind of contribute on drill book stuff?
Yep. I think that if you don't do it, just understand that your coaches are going other places to get their drills. And
Yes.
And we're going to kind of talk about how this shows up in a game. And that's a very big aspect for me when I'm thinking drills. And it better look like a game of football minus however many other people. If it's a tackling drill, there's a reason why the Oklahoma drill is terrible. Okay. Yes, it runs the roost. Everyone knows the Oklahoma drill. I don't just know it because I'm from Oklahoma. I know it because it's been ran in Maine. It's been ran in Japan, I'm sure. But it is absolutely terrible, right? At what point have you ever had two linemen just block each other up and then a linebacker has a free shot at a running back? Never, right? If that's the situation, it's very, very bad for that running back. There's going to be a lead blocker because that's how football works. We have numbers, right? We manipulate blockers to get numbers. So at minimum, that drill should have one more blocker that linebacker has to get around before he concusses your running back because he's running full speed downhill. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So make sure that whatever drill you're running shows up in a game. If you need to just look at game film and say, what play did we stink at? Okay, and maybe it's power. Okay, that's fine. We stink at power. Why? Well, we're missing our kick out block. Great. Then we can have a defensive end that surfs, a guy blocking it, and then and this goes back to your pod work. You might as well have a running back that's following the guard, and you know what I mean, and get hand on the guard. I call it hogging it. I've always called it hand on the guard, so hogging it, and attach all those people. Now you've got a linebacker that can read that pulling guard, right? So we can attach all these pieces, but make sure it shows up in the game. Mm-hmm. Justin DeTavio is a guy that we've talked to many times, and I've had many conversations with him, and he made a huge Twitter thing about a month ago about all the ridiculous running back drills going on in the NCAA and the NFL right now, right? Like one group has a set of running backs in a line, and they have to jump and get their highest vertical, drop down, and then run a drill. And he's like, at what point did that running back ever have a full vertical, land, and now they get a ball handed off to them in a football game. Never. What are you doing, right? Like it's crazy. I saw some at Tulsa this weekend that I was like, that's not football. That's a drill that probably has been handed down, and maybe it had a purpose, right? And maybe I didn't understand the why, which kind of goes back what you're talking about there. But and sometimes you just see some stuff and you're like, what on earth are you doing? Are you proving toughness? Because that's what the Oklahoma drill did, right? It proved toughness. Unfortunately, I have never seen it ran that we didn't break somebody's arm, tear a knee, something. So risk and reward is just not really there. You brought up feed the cats earlier and how big of that, or how big of a part that is in your drills. So can you kind of just explain, without jumping too much into Tony's stuff, but what is that feed the cats mentality, and how does that work in your drill book or in your drills?
I'm not going to steal Tony's, kind of thunder. I know we're bringing him on later on, but basically the way I look at feed the cats is being intentional with the amount of effort you're asking kids to do. So think about it this way: if you have 25 minutes worth of individual time, asking kids to go full speed every single drill, how many times could they theoretically do that and have anything really left in the tank for a team or whatever else there? So a lot of times what we will do with our drills is we'll kind of structure them where one drill is full speed. So I'll use receivers as kind of an example. We may have receivers do ball drills and we don't require them to go full speed on this. So this is usually like a half speed, but we're getting a lot of catches and touches, different angles. And then the next drill might be running routes and we are going full speed on those. We're just limiting our reps. And then we may come back. The next drill might be like a cut drill where you can go slow, but we only want you to go fast on the cut. And so we're just working with our kids on, when we ask you to go full speed, we expect 100%. If you don't do that, what will happen is your kids they're not dumb. Like they start to realize, they condition themselves to, okay, coach is going to ask me to do all of this. And then they kind of store up what they're doing. And Tony would say that's run at sub max, which essentially means kids are not ever playing full speed until you play a game on Friday, which is why all your kids cramp. And so that was kind of the idea there. So for us, that's kind of how we structure our drills, is maybe a drill is more talking and skill, not as much just effort, pure effort. And then the next drill, a lot more effort. And then the next one, or even could be within a drill. It could be, all right, you're going to run a full speed post, but I'm going to give you 40 seconds to recover before we ask you to do that again. Right. So that's kind of the feed the cats deal there. And I think the last thing we had on this kind of section was, you've already kind of hit on a little bit, is, man, don't run drills that don't show up in a game. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, because everybody can run the drills they want to run. It's definitely up to you. By far, we're not the know-it-alls, but man, it drives me insane to watch, like, go to a basketball practice and watch the first thing they do is they get up 2 basketballs. When the crap are they dribbling with 2 basketballs in a game? Like, how does that even matter? Like, if you want to work on a left-hand dribbling, put the ball in his left hand and put pressure in his face. You want to work on left-hand layups, shoot. When are you going to go up there and shoot free throws with both hands, like 1, 2? So
right.
But we do the same stuff in football. Like, all right, we're going to have this receiver make 5 cuts and catch 5 balls, and then he's going to do this. Or you mentioned the running back drills. All that was a guy who had way too much time on his hand, or he's a position coach and just has way too much time of practicing.
Too much any time.
Fill the time up. Yeah.
Yep. That's what happens when you get into that 3-hour practice and you have an hour of indie. You don't need it, right? What do you use? You're making up stuff.
Right.
I had a point here to make. I spoke with Dub Maddox this weekend. Hello, Dub. Shout out to you. He'll be on at some point on the podcast. And we were just talking about University of Tulsa's quarterback drills. And I was just networking. That was kind of my goal there, was to meet the area coaches. And we got to talking about, I knew he has the R4 system. And so was talking to him about that. And, I'm at a point where I'm applying for head coaching and offensive coordinator positions, because I think with my military time, I'm ready. I'm ready to step up and do that. And I'll probably be terrible. Who knows? Anyway, but the quarterback is where I'm really weak, right? And so I was just talking to him about his pieces and kind of, we'd had a guest on the other podcast, and Dylan Terry had come on and talk about his R4 system. Anyway, I just asked him, comparing what he does to what Tulsa was doing, and he was like, no, I would never do any of that stuff, which kind of comes back to that, when high school coaches often are some of the best in the country, because we do a lot with a little, or maybe we do a medium amount with a little, but generally we have a little. But he talked about something that made so much sense, and we use it a lot. We may not realize it. We talked about it in situational with your overall team practice, but he said that a quarterback every drill should have to make a decision. Yeah. So never in football are you going to catch the ball and throw a quick out. You're just not going to do it. There's going to be something that made you do that. When is a quick out appropriate? Is it Brent Dearmon runs he's got his, what he calls the proposal. If you love it, throw it quick out, because I've read the defense. So that could be incorporated. If I'm going to throw quick outs, put a DB there and make the quarterback read that DB. What route am I going to throw? Even if it's your quick game, I'm going to hitch, slant, or go, but I'm not just going to throw hitches all day, right? I need to read a DB, now make that throw. Even if it adds that little bit of pressure or that change of mind or whatever it is, right? Right before I have to do this very simple task that I've been doing since I was 5 years old. My dad was grooming me to be a quarterback. Like, I've done that. Let's move on. Let's add some complexity. So, Gun T, you're a huge RPO system. Not everyone is. If you're running zone, just common zone, read the backside. If it's power, throw power read in there. Make the quarterback make a decision on every single play. But it can be like that for everyone, right? A lineman, make sure that when you line up, I'm not just running pulling drills. Coach, you throw the they got to run in the, what do you call the PVC pipe?
Little buck hurdles.
There you go, the buck hurdles, right? So that keeps their pad height down somewhat, and it shows them the target goal. So they've had to make some decisions there. Whatever it is, make people count. Make people do something football related in that drill. And you never just... it blows me away how much people just run a drill to be running a drill, and I turn around and hand the football off to Joey, who runs to the orange cone. What have you done there? You've not gotten anything done. So just make sure, once again, where does this show up in the game, and then use the game to develop that drill. So I'm not going to throw a slant. I know a lot of people line up and just throw what we used to call it 90s game, right? You have the old school route tree and you just throw everything. But why not just leave that guy over there, just finish his route, and let him run some corner and make the throw be precise? Perfect practice makes perfect. Throwing routes on air does not make perfect. So we're going to push through. Sorry, I had a little tantrum there, I feel like. But
I'm going to tell you one thing that makes me mad, and I know probably Coach Gould somewhere around listening, I'm sure, because he'd laugh about this. We make sure we ask him, we get him on, is how many times I'll walk out there Thursday and go, guys, we just lost to air. So I hope our opponent's worse than air tomorrow.
That's a good one. Yeah. So we're going to push into pod work now. Pod work is something you introduced to me, and I didn't understand it. Because I couldn't look at our scheme at the time and identify who should go together. So it was almost confusing, and so confusing I didn't even want to put the time into it.
Right.
But it just clicked. Like, if we're down blocking, everyone who down blocks, you're going to talk about, I'm sure, and how you do it by series. So you have a buck day, you have a counter day, a Trojan day, or whatever. But everyone who's down blocking, just go down block, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. But they're there with the down block coach, the guy who's going to teach them how to down block the best. Something else I learned was your tight end or your H-back coach. It was a newer guy on your staff, right? And he was like, I kind of just watch other guys coach my H-backs all day. And that's okay. You're learning football as a coach too, but you can go back and cover those things post-practice, or you still get your 2 cents. It's not like you're being cut out. But it gets the guy who really knows what he's talking about coaching all of them at the same time. And I really liked that aspect. So now that I've stolen your thunder, I'll let you...
Oh, you're good. We kind of hit pods a little bit earlier, but if you're more interested in specifically how we do it, of course, reach out to me. I'll get you in all the Gun T stuff with the 3/4 swarm stuff. That my idea, I think you could do behind any offense, and that's what you kind of mentioned there, Daniel, was if you're teaching a skill, like if we're going to teach some kind of blocking, Coach Gould is my O-line guy, and he's probably the guy I want teaching it. I don't really care what position that is. If we're asking our running backs to somehow they're lead blocking or insert blocking, who's the best guy to teach them? Well, it's not the running back coach who ran. I've got a running back coach on my staff that ran for like a gazillion yards, but he probably wasn't much of a blocker, right. But Bo could get them over there and kind of coach them up on what they're supposed to do. The same thing with my receiver coach. So just think about the skills that you teach and what positions need to have those skills. So not every offense is super multiple. We're very multiple. I would say the Gun T is extremely multiple, which means that guys have to work multiple skills. And I think that football is kind of going that direction. So I think more people are kind of getting it. If you don't run what we run, but you run 11 personnel because that sounds cooler to say, then that's fine too. There are skills those guys need to do. So think about like a tight end, those hybrid type players. Those guys may need to move to multiple spots to get all the skill work they need done. And so again, we mentioned a few things on here. Just going to kind of recap them. Forces you to have a common language. Now if we say, we're going to pull wrap, our eyes are inside, then anyone on our offense is going to pull and wrap, which would be our tight end, sometimes our H-back. They're getting that same language from the same coach. So we all can speak the same thing. We talk with our receivers about, keeping our hands tight and how we want to catch a ball. Well, now we're all getting the same language. All our coaches have to be on the same staff as well. And I don't know if you've been around long enough, Daniel, but at some point the crap's going to hit the fan on the field. And what you don't want is dissension among your staff. But when we've all worked with everybody's players and we've had to you're going to have some arguments in the meeting room when you're doing that. We've never had them on the field, but you're going to have some dissension among, I don't really like my kid doing this drill, whatever. And then let's hash it out in the meeting room. What you don't want is that to be Friday night or a practice field, so this kind of forces us to go through the hard part first so that when the hard times come, we've already walked through that.
I very much walked into a staff this year and my education of the O-line makes me believe I'm a good O-line coach, and I've got some experience there. And I walked in and I had to be a co-offensive lineman, and our lingo was different. I walked in with the Joe Daniel system, Joe Daniel football, and then what I had pieced together from yours, and I made this crazy little hybrid of the two, which was a blast to do, and I absolutely love it. But I walked into a guy that was not part of either of those systems, and we had to co-coach the same position. So what you're saying makes so much sense, because there was that tension between us, just because I'm like, we aren't doing any drills that make sense to me. What can you walk me through your drills? And then I'm introducing mine to him, to where if it had just been like just down blocks, it's the terminology on down block, whether it's angles or first steps or whatever you're teaching about that position, we weren't even together and we taught the same position. So I can imagine, if I'm trying to have an H-back coach tell him how to pull wrap and eyes inside, he's not an O-line coach. Why would he know it? You know what I mean? So I do like the idea of just the guys who know what's going on coach the kids on how to do it, and that's beautiful. Last part we're going to jump into here is going to be all about team. So setting up your team practice. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the question here, Coach. So how are you communicating plays during practice time?
Yeah, so a couple of things that, Coach Gould and I learned, I had a year where I was up in the box. And so he was on the field calling our plays for us. So we learned that after the first game, maybe we ought to practice that before we play a game. So there's a couple of things you can do on that. One, you got to figure out what is your strategy to communicate it, and you need to work that in team. If it's going to be we're all on the field, that's fine too. Who's calling them, who's signaling them, who's doing whatever. And so that might mean you break out the headsets and kind of go through this stuff. We've done it, I think, basically Wednesday on. We usually will break our headsets out and we'll put them on for team. And so we work through that process of, all right, coach, I know you want to be out here with your quarterback and kind of holding his hand like I like to do, but you need to back away and be on the sideline, and let's work on our communication deal. So there's lots of ways you can communicate, and there's 100 ways you can communicate as a coach. Go no huddle, signals, armbands, verbal. There's a lot of ways you can do it. Whatever it is, you need to practice it that way. Because if you don't, you end up practicing where you're 5 yards behind the offense, and then a couple things happen on that. One, you're communicating right there, so you're not practicing that. And two, who do they look to when a problem happens? They look to you, and then you fix their problem, and you're not out there in a game. So who do they look to then? So there's a lot of things you need to kind of allow to happen during team. So that was the first kind of section we had on team, I think. What else we got on there?
Man, talking about how game-like can you make it, and you just then stepped into something that a lot of coaches are they feel embarrassed or ridiculous about doing, and that's putting on the headsets. But how else are you going to get used to reading your system? The gun tee's built on who's out of place, who made the play. Right. Well, if I've spent no time in the box all week And now on Friday night, we have our opening drive, and I'm supposed to tell you how I read a linebacker made the play or whatever, but I'm not experienced at it. That's hard. I'll tell you the number one thing I've noticed about people in the box, and I did it my first year, and I still have to tell myself not to do it. You get caught watching football.
Yep.
You got the whole game in front of you, and it's very easy to go, man, that was a good run, right? And all I did was watch my running back, and maybe I'm the running back coach. Who knows, right? And I get caught on one position or just watching the pigskin. I forget that I have that other duty of like, I'm supposed to be seeing who makes the tackle and reading a number so we know who to, what problem to fix.
Yeah, I'm as guilty as anybody. A lot of times we stick young coaches up there in the box and we don't tell them what we want them to do. And then we go, well, you're not giving me any help. Well, what exactly did you tell them they're supposed to do? So you need to practice all that stuff during the week, like you mentioned, not just up there on Friday and he's going, hey, coach, if you had a reverse right now, that would work real good. And thanks,
right.
That didn't help you any, but that was your fault for not giving him something to look at.
Yep. And I think that helps what you're talking about, just problem solving. What do I need to delegate? What do I need to instruct them to do? Maybe you don't know as a head coach. So start on Wednesday. Throw the guy in the box for team and be like, I just want you to tell me who makes the play or what position is creeping up. Because now we all know that on scout, they know what play's coming. They listen to you call the play usually, right? Or they know how you call plays. So they're going to be heroes anyway. Scout team heroes are very, very common. But why not just call the audible or, whatever your next play? Answer that question. That kid screamed through and made a tackle. Cool. Let's put an RPO behind his head and slow him down a little bit, right? Making team more game-like. And you touched on at the beginning, and that was the situations. And that's something that we all could probably get better at. And what situations are you using in team? Is it the same stuff you talked about before, just hashes and downs?
Yeah, very much down and distance. And then one thing I didn't get into a whole lot was we do time management. So I think down there at the end of this, I'd kind of wrote a couple notes about we always work a situation at the end of every practice. So Tuesday, starting from Tuesday, Monday's kind of an install day for us. So Tuesday and Wednesday, we work some kind of team situation on air. So it's a relatively low pressure because you're on air, but we're working, okay, there's 30 seconds to go in a game and we're down by 6. And so we're going to line up our offense and we have no timeouts. So we got to bing, 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 bing. Or maybe we're up by 4 with 4 minutes to go. And we work through these scenarios, not just offense, but we'll also do the special teams aspect of it. We try to get an offense, special team, defense, or the reverse order of that. So it might be like we're down 13 with 3 minutes. So we got to score, get the extra point, and get an onside kick. Or right. Maybe we're up 7 or down 7. So we're going to score and go for 2 to win it. What are we going to run? And so we try to work that on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Because what most coaches do is they work all situations on Thursday. And so by doing it on Monday and Tuesday, it shortens our practice on Thursday. And now imagine 10 weeks, 2 extra days of situation. I've got 20 different situations that we're going to go through that you're not going through. And so when that hits us, we're ready for it.
I'll tell you where it showed up for us this year. And this is something that I can't remember where I got it. I don't think it was any of the coaches I've coached for, but in the middle of your plan, just having an assistant coach that has the power to just scream, punt it. And right now, I'm on play 3 of my script, but right now the punt team's got to go, or field goal, or whatever it is. Right now, without you knowing as a coach, without the players knowing, we got to punt it right now. What we ran into this year, we had 2 different scenarios that I can't remember if either cost us games, but very easily could have if they didn't. Number one, when to use which punter. So we used our quarterback as one, so we had a little more of a fake built in. And then we had a traditional punter that was his job was to boot the crap out of the ball. And we mixed them up in a game because we as coaches didn't know which one to use because we'd not practiced. So we needed to go out and boom a punt and get some field position, but our quarterback ran out on the field or stayed on the field or whatever it was. And we didn't know to fix it because we'd not practiced. Like, when are we going to use those guys? We've not given them rules to live by, right? And then we get to a spot where we need to fake it, and our real punter runs on because now he's had his tail chewed because the coach was wrong, and that's how we solve problems, right? Is we chew the tail of the player that we should have told to do something better. So he runs out, and now we're like closing the game out. We need to go for a fake. Now we got a traditional punter on, and we don't have timeouts to call it to get him on. Another issue we had was the field goal. Unfortunately, it was the same punter. He was our field goal kicker too, and a D lineman and a tight end. He had a lot of jobs, but 2 games or 3 games, I can't remember, and this sounds really bad on us as a staff, and that's because it is, and I'm going to take those lumps right now publicly, but didn't know where the kicking tee was. So we need to kick a field goal, and our kicker's running around on the sidelines like, I don't know. And in the booth, we're like, he doesn't know where it is. Send the person who kicks without it, right? We had a young lady who was pretty decent kicking field goals. She was a soccer player. She joined the team, caught a 2-point conversion in a scrimmage. It was beautiful. But she kicked without the stinking tee. So it was like, situationally, are we ready for that? Hide the tees and call field goal and see what happens, right? There's so many situations you can go over. But we had a couple or 3 games there where we didn't know where the tees were, and our guys freaking out. And it either cost us a timeout or we just had to send the O back out because we're not ready to kick this thing, whatever it was. But it cost you because we didn't waste the practice time, right? You didn't spend that time ahead of time, and it cost you later on. So structure, we're talking about like how much structure is actually needed. When are you over structuring your team practice? So what are your thoughts there, Coach?
Sure. I think obviously you need to script your practice, but you mentioned a few things there, like where you're going to have these built in, so it's coming, but not when it's coming. So like I give one of my Coach Gould, I give him the opportunity to call we have these kind of built in fast plays that will run randomly. So I give him the ability to call those whenever. You mentioned you might have a special team of the day that if you call that, they got to go out there. Here's what I mean by overstructuring it, though. A lot of times as an offensive coach or even as a defensive coaches are usually a little better because they have to be extremely organized. But offensive coaches get really mad, like when the defense doesn't line up like they were supposed to on the card, and then they don't do it in the game on Friday like that either, And so sometimes we can be a little over structured where that's not how he's going to be. Well, what if he is like that? I mean, you still have to play the game the way the game is meant to be played. And so while you need to be more prepared is way better than less prepared, there is kind of a balance in there that you need to find.
Yeah, and I've seen that in head coaches in my career of that, like, stop practice, wasting this 2 minutes to chew out a coach or tell a player to get right because we think, number one, we think they're going to be in a 5-2 because we faced it for the last 3 weeks. Okay, great. But what if they don't, right? And luckily, I've had Joe as a mentor for a couple of years now as well, and he very much is like, I don't care what they do. We have rules to live by, and as long as you follow your rules, we've got this. Like if he's inside and you do the rule that says he was supposed to be inside, great. If he's outside and your rules change it, who cares? We're practicing football, and that's a situational thing that you don't even have to build in. Like your players are just getting reps, being agile-minded, right? Being able to work around problems. Last one's finished with a scenario, and not just on Thursday. I know you kind of touched on that before. Are there any other like into practice scenarios you just love?
And there's a million of them. I mean, it's anything where you can involve a special team, offense and defense. So that could be get a score, kick it, get an onside kick, play dime defense. It could be you got to create a turnover, you got to score quickly. It could be you have to sell out and block a punt. I mean, there's all these things where you're down, you're up 2, so your team needs to understand we only need a field goal, or down 2. Either way you want to go. So just kind of understanding all these scenarios, you get twice as many times or 3 times as many scenarios if you'll work these on Tuesday and on Wednesday, not just on Thursday.
Yep. All right, man. So it looks like we've checked all the boxes there, ready to push into our what not to do as a coach. So I'm gonna coin this on my end just because is the file of how to lose football games, or that was the Bill Blankenship way, right? He keeps a file on how he's lost all of his ball games. So, but what are we not doing as a coach?
Well, today's segment of what not to do as a coach is don't run drills just because you saw them on Twitter. And I'm not suggesting that a Twitter drill isn't good, but I am suggesting that sometimes they are definitely not good. And so be careful when you're getting a drill from some social media platform, be that YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, whatever it is. While there's a lot of good material out there, make sure you have kind of a checklist of questions you go through. 1, does this drill make any sense? That should be the first drill thing you ask. And if the guy has like a pool noodle or something, then the answer is no. Okay. If he's holding anything other than a football, the answer is no. Okay, so does this happen in the game? Does this make sense? Okay. Second question you need to ask is, does this fit in our scheme? Is this something that we're going to do? You could be watching a really good drill offensive lineman that are running inside zone, and you don't run inside zone.
Right.
So that's not a good drill for you. It doesn't mean it's a bad drill. It's a bad drill for you. And then third, does this fit something our players are capable of doing? You may be watching some Division I college working a man press concept, and your corner runs a 5-2. So you need to understand, like, that's a great drill. That's a really good drill for man coverage. We're not going to run man coverage because our corner runs a 5-2. And so you need to understand, okay, so go back to the top. 1, does this drill make any sense? And does it show up on a game? 2, does this fit our scheme? And then finally, 3, can our players actually do this? And you may put a little 3B if you want to. Do I know enough to actually coach this? Like, is this something I can coach? And if he screws it up, I can correct.
Yep. Good point. All right, Coach, before we get out of here, why don't you tell us a way we can simplify football for our staff and our players?
Again, so this podcast is sponsored by Find a Way Productions. Find a Way Productions has the offensive coordinator academy.com, which is going to house all kinds of materials for the offensive coordinator, from a weekly planner to a workbook, of course, a full academy. And there's also smaller products like a play call sheet in there, a lot of other things in there. We also have the Defensive Coordinator Academy. Defensive Coordinator Academy has the full academy. It also has the workbook, the daily planner or weekly planner for the defensive coordinator, as well as call sheets and other smaller materials. And of course, fbcoachsimpson.com, which is going to house over 20, I think it's 28 different books now. It has the free magazine headsets, over 21 issues of free football material in there, multiple templates. It also houses the gun tee system, and it also houses the 3-4 swarm. So if you want anything football, go to offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, or fbcoachsimpson.com, and we hope that will be able to get you what you need.
Coach, if somebody wants to write an article for headsets, where do they contact it? Like, how do they get that to you?
Sure, they can send it to me at fbcoachsimpson@gmail.com, which I know we're kind of about to close it up here, so I'll go ahead and get into that now. Good segue there, Daniel. If they want to reach out to me, it's anything FB Coach Simpson. So fbcoachsimpson@gmail.com is my email. At FB Coach Simpson on Twitter. Of course, we also have a Twitter handle for this podcast as well, so you could ask us questions on that also. Excited about that new venture, but those are the major ways you can reach out to me, and I'm pretty available on all social media platforms.
That podcast he's talking about, this podcast, the Twitter handle is at Coaching101pod. Apparently your handle has to be a certain number of letters, so podcast wouldn't work. I know some people call them pods. I just don't. It's weird. So Coaching101pod. I am at Coach Chambo OK. You can reach me by email at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. Chamberlain's just like Wilt the Stilt. So don't Google me, Google Wilt Chamberlain, and then that's how you spell it. So chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. That's how you can reach out to all of us. I want to thank you for being a listener on the Coaching 101 podcast. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when the new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.